Good morning, welcome back to the Deep 404. I'm going to run through a Middle East update today. There is a lot that has happened. A lot of news over the past 24 hours or so around the Middle East. I'm going to start with a little bit of a summary of what has happened from, this is from Al Jazeera, but I'll go through some of this and then move on to some activity in certain areas within Israel, Gaza and the West Bank. But Qatar has brokered a deal between Israel and Hamas to provide or to enable the bringing in of medicine into Gaza. The deal that has been brokered is that medical supplies can be brought in for the civilians, citizens of Gaza, but certain medical supplies must also be provided to about 45 of the Israeli hostages who reportedly require medicine and which is running out for them. This has been agreed to. Apparently France is going to be providing the medicines. That will be flown in today to Qatar. Qatar will then take that medicine and transport it to Egypt. And then from Egypt, it will be sent across the Rafah crossing, I imagine, into Gaza. There has been some concern on the Hamas side about the medicines to be given to the Israeli hostages. Not that the medicine be given to them as such, but that the medicines may be tracked. Apparently they will be very cautious with it, looking at it, I imagine, changing it into other containers and that sort of thing. They're concerned that the Israelis may have placed tracking devices somehow within those medicines so that they can then determine where the hostages are being kept within Gaza. Hamas announced attacks on Israeli forces in northern Gaza, where Israel previously had said that it had dismantled the Palestinian group's military framework. So this has been an ongoing thing where in the north of Gaza, IDF has said, we've taken control of all this area. We're even pulling some brigades out. But there are reports coming from Hamas that they are still operating those areas and still attacking the Israeli forces there. In the south of Gaza, in the vicinity of the Nasser hospital and Al-Amal hospital in Khan Younis, Israeli IDF forces have leveled homes in southern Gaza. Now remember that the fighting was originally in the northern part of Gaza, and Israeli forces said everyone in the north move to the south and you'll be safe. Then there was some bombing around the Rafah crossing. And now it seems as though the Israeli forces are moving down to the south and starting to bomb houses and infrastructure and hospitals and things there. The problem here, of course, is that what's in the north has been reduced to rubble. There's no infrastructure, there's no power, there's no water, there's no hospitals. So the people in the south can't easily move to the north. They are now just being bottled up, like if you see a net being drawn upon fish, how they all start to coalesce and thicken and dense and in there. That's what's happening in the south, and now the Israelis are bombing and making attacks on the south. The Israeli army has said it has redeployed an elite unit from Gaza to the West Bank, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, where the IDF is saying that the situation is spiraling. This is in the West Bank. Excuse me, I think I need to sneeze. Maybe not. Apologies. So increased activity going on within Israel in the West Bank. So this conflict in Gaza looking to be spilling over and growing in the West Bank as well. Remember, Hamas are not in the West Bank. UN experts have reportedly said that Israel is destroying Gaza's food system and using food as a weapon against the Palestinian people. So this is the United Nations. And Al Jazeera reports that the Palestinian death toll has risen to at least 24,285 people killed since October the 7th. Now, in the West Bank, as I said, there is reports there that in the last 24 hours, and there are videos showing the Israeli Defense Forces allegedly engaging in abducting Palestinians from camps within the West Bank, and Nablus, Tulkarem, and the Disher camp. There is also reports of this is from last night, the Israeli Defense Forces moving towards the Thabet hospital. A report by a group called the Palestinian Prisoners Club suggests that since the 7th of October, the Israeli forces have abducted nearly 6,000 Palestinians in the West Bank. Now, I don't know. I can't corroborate that. I'm not there. But there is certainly reports from many sources of increased activity in the West Bank over the last few days, and this has been, of course, going on throughout this whole period of time, but seems to there's some level of increase at the moment. Just want to go through a couple of videos here, if you give me one moment. This first video, just play that again for you. So you can see those explosions there, pretty close to this hospital. Now, this video is reportedly from around southern Gaza, Khan Younis, where people have been collecting near the Nasser medical complex. And as we can see and reported earlier, the Israeli Defense Forces are targeting houses and things in the area. And this has come after Palestinians have been forced from the north and into southern Gaza. There's some other footage here. Just give me a moment to cue it up that I was going to show you, which I think was... I don't know if you can hear this. But that is reportedly sounds of the fighting going on again near this area in the south. I just have one more video that I'm just going to show here. This is of an Israeli large military bulldozer creeping down a street. I think it's this one here. And I just can't help but think just how terrifying that type of thing must be for kids. You know, I've got two little kids, and the thought of monster armour-plated bulldozers growling their way down the streets outside my house and their house at night time with the sound of gunfire and explosions going on all around them is just... I can't comprehend living that way. Anyhow, yeah, reports that in Rafah, on the southern border with Israel, between Israel and Egypt in the Sinai region, a bombing occurred there last night. Reportedly, 8 people were killed in that house, 2 of them girls. At least 23... Sorry. At least 23 Palestinians killed in Khan Younis overnight. as Israeli attacks leveled dozens of residential homes near that Nasser and Al-Amal hospitals. That's where some of those earlier videos were of those explosions occurring in the background. And another report from the UN saying that every single person in Gaza is hungry as Israel continues to bomb and block aid to the territory. Now, the whole area around here, things are happening. So this is Hezbollah, who are on the northern border of Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon. They are supporting the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And they have provided just a summary of their activities. So I'll just go through this. It's not too long, but a summary of their Hezbollah activities over the last 24 hours. They say in the eastern sector at 2 p.m. they targeted the Samakar site in the occupied Lebanese Sheba Farms area with missile weapons and hitting their target directly. At 3:30, in the vicinity of the settlements of the occupied area of Nabi Yusha, using batches of appropriate missiles as a response to the enemy, in this case the enemy being the Israeli Defense Forces, the enemy aggressions in the surrounding areas of the southern villages. At 4:20, targeting the Bayad Blida site with appropriate weapons and hitting it directly. In the western sector, at 10:45, targeting of a gathering of Israeli army soldiers east of the Even Menachem settlement with rocket weapons. At 4:20, targeting of gathering of Israeli army soldiers around the Ramia site with appropriate weapons and hitting it directly. At 6:20 p.m, targeting the Hadab al-Bustan site with Burkan missiles and hitting it directly. So Hezbollah is continuing to retaliate against the Israeli forces on the northern border. So we have growing activity in the West Bank. We have Gaza, Hamas still fighting there. We have activity on the northern border. As I reported yesterday, we also had reports of conflicting reports. Egypt saying that they encountered 20 smugglers, drug smugglers on the border with Israel. Israel saying they encountered 20 smugglers from Egypt on the border of Israel. Something going on there. Perhaps a small Egypt IDF skirmish, which has been put under the rug as drug smugglers. At least one of the Israeli forces was hospitalised with some being wounded. It's entirely possible that tensions are rising on that border there, and this may actually have been an Egyptian and Israeli conflict and skirmish. And I'm speculating here. Of course, I don't know, but it was interesting that both sides were saying, we encountered drug smugglers, and there was a fight going on. It wasn't as though, we encountered the same group and we fought together to retain them. It was like the same story coming from both sides. Anyhow, now here, I just want to show this this image, because this image has come out. I talked about this the other day. But Iran has announced that its strikes into Syria from Iran is the longest range strike that they have ever managed with their missiles. And it was a 1,200 kilometre range, and it flew from Khuzestan area in Iran down here, across north of Baghdad, south of Erbil, all across Iraq and all across Syria to here. Now, it wasn't intercepted anywhere along the way by any air defence. Sorry, wrong button. And if we just look at this map, you can see this dotted line here, which shows 1,200 kilometres, the range that missile travelled, which gets you to Tel Aviv, as I showed again the other day. But this is, everyone's aware of this now. This is coming out that the Iranians have effectively sent a signal to the Israelis and said, look, we can send a missile this far and you're within that range now. And this missile got itself all the way across Iraq and Syria, and no one shot it down. No Americans thought it was a problem and tried to shoot it down from the American bases. Saudi Arabia didn't try to reach out and shoot it down. I guess that gives some indication that perhaps such a missile headed towards Tel Aviv might get its way across Iraq and over Jordan before anyone tried to shoot it down. And by that stage, it's getting harder to shoot down. Anyhow, certainly some sort of a message given there to the Israelis by the Iranian forces. Aid in Yemen is suffering. So there's a couple of interesting things around this. There was an article I saw which said, is the US and the UK trying to punish civilians in Yemen, knowing that airstrikes will not be effective against a country which the US, UK, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates has previously bombed over 25,000 times? And what they were suggesting was that the recent 80 Tomahawk missiles and the subsequent follow-up attacks would not have done a great deal of damage to the Houthis, would not have degraded their capabilities by a great extent, which many people have suggested. However, it does risk deepening a humanitarian crisis in Yemen. A coalition of 23 aid organisations operating within the Gulf state of Yemen issued a joint statement on Tuesday warning that military escalation will further compromise their ability to deliver critical services and will worsen the living conditions for millions of people in Yemen. So people are suggesting that this was perhaps a more strategic strike and not purely a military one, but this increased activity, US and UK strikes into Yemen, would put pressure on the population by scaring off the aid organisations, leaving the population to suffer, hopefully then putting further pressure upon Yemen and the Houthis to calm down. There was an interesting video I saw yesterday of a senior Yemeni military figure who had reportedly defected, if you will, to the Houthis, had given an apology and said, look, I'm sorry that I've been fighting with the Houthis. I realise now that the Houthis are right in what they're doing and I'm going to join them. Again, I wasn't there. I can't confirm it, but there does seem to be strong support in Yemen for the Houthis. And this sort of activity, if it is aimed to deprive the people of Yemen of aid, may well backfire. I don't know if you've seen the images of the reporter. No, I don't believe it's AI. I think it was a real image. Not that I could really tell, but I believe it was a real image showing a protest gathering in Yemen, and there were a lot of people there coming out in support of the Houthis and the Palestinians in Gaza. So there is a lot of growing support in these areas. Further, the Japanese Nippon Yusen shipping company has decided that it will suspend operations in the Red Sea. It was the group that was owning and running the Galaxy Leader ship that was seized. However, we're seeing that there has been a whole heap of shipping being rerouted around the Red Sea now. However, reports are that the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea have not affected Russian oil supplies. Bloomberg itself reports that Russia's maritime supplies of crude oil have not been affected by attacks on shipping in the southern Red Sea. According to the Bloomberg analysis, all Russian oil destined for buyers in Asia continues to pass through the Red Sea untroubled. So, clearly we see here the Houthis saying, we've told you what we're going after. We're going after Israeli-affiliated ships, and now, because you've bombed us, we're going after US and UK-affiliated ships. Russian oil, safe passage through this area. In some other news here, reported yesterday, the US Senate has voted against a resolution put forward by independent Senator Bernie Sanders, calling for the US State Department to report on Israel's human rights practices. no big surprise there, I guess. The Israel, of course, the US tied at the hip in terms of its support for Israel, and that support extends in all areas, not just financial aid and military aid, but also any activity that may look to besmirch the name of Israel in any way. The US very hesitant to do that, and so no surprise that the Senate has voted to not support a resolution that would call on Israel's human rights practices to be reviewed and called into the spotlight. But as I say, so that brief update of what's going on, continued escalation, at this stage, really, I wouldn't be surprised with anything erupting in the Middle East in the coming days. There doesn't seem to be anyone suppressing things anywhere. At this stage, Hezbollah seem to be relatively restrained. They're keeping their activity up in a tit for tat on the border. But if Hezbollah move into this conflict, things will change very quickly. Iran, of course, getting pushed further and further to some sort of activity. This missile strike, again, I think it's giving a strong signal. I guess, look, the one good piece of news out of yesterday is that deal brokered by Qatar, in at least medical supplies will be getting into Gaza. We'll be getting to those people who desperately need it. We'll be getting through to the Israeli hostages as well. So one small piece of good news, I guess, out of yesterday's reporting. Okay, I'll leave that there for today. Look, I hope that you're having a good day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.